They didn't understand. So you turn to the next neighbor and say, neighbor, can God trust you with trouble? That's where I'm going. When I was in Detroit last week, I heard the man of God say, Bishop Liston Jr. II said, he said, turn to your neighbor, and I'm going to give you what he said. Turn to your neighbor and say, neighbor, God is making me 1,000 times better. You didn't understand what I said. It came from the book of Deuteronomy, the 1st chapter and the 11th verse. Come on, turn to your neighbor again and say, neighbor, God is making me 1,000 times better. But can he trust you with trouble? Amen. If you would, Minister Duncan, read for me 1 Samuel, the 30th chapter, verse 1 through verse 8.
And it came to pass, when David and his men were come to Ziklag on the 3rd day, that the Amalekites had invaded the south, and Ziklag, and smitten Ziklag, and burned it with fire, and had taken the women captives that were therein. They slew not any, either great or small, but carried them away and went on their way. So David and his men came to the city, and behold, it was burned with fire, and their wives and their sons and their daughters were taken captive. Then David and the people that were with him lifted up their voice and wept until they had no power to weep. And David's 2 wives were taken captive, Ahinoam the Jezreelitess, and Abigail the wife of Nabal the Carmelite. And David was greatly distressed, for the people spake of stoning him, because the soul of all the people was grieved, every man for his sons and for his daughters. But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. And David said to Abiathar the priest, Amalek's sons, I pray thee, bring me hither the ephod. And Abiathar brought thither the ephod to David. And David inquired at the Lord, saying, shall I pursue after this truth? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all.
Amen. Amen. Can God trust you with trouble? I have 3 points, and the first point is a shocking discovery. A shocking discovery. A sobbing distress. A serious decision. As Minister Duncan has just read in the book of 1 Samuel, the 30th chapter, it speaks about how David and his men had came into the city of Ziklag. And when they got there, they found out now that their wives and their sons and their daughters and the elderly now were taken captive. And when they saw that the city had been burnt down and that their wives and everyone that were in the city were taken captive, they began to weep. And the Bible said that they weep until they had no more power to cry. They cried until their cry ducts went away, or they didn't have no more tear to cry. So the same ones now, I'm almost finished preaching, the same ones now that was with David now, that said now, I will die for you, David, that went into combat now with David now. The ones that didn't mind going and leaving their families now, just for David. But these now were the same ones now that wanted now to stone David. What are you saying to me? You're telling me now the same ones that walk with me and talk with me and eat with me now. Now what are you saying? They want to kill me. The same ones now that didn't mind dying for David. someone to blame their fault on. So the person now that they wanted to blame their fault was David. But how many know that David wasn't the enemy?